Thanks a lot, Flora. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'll introduce the panelists first and then tell you a little bit about the film clip that I'm going to play you from this forthcoming world debate, BBC World Debate, which focuses on the question, is homosexuality un-African? We can have a conversation about whether that's a good question to be asking or not. But to discuss that question and any others that you may ask tonight, we're joined by John Bosco Nyombi from Uganda, who's now resident in the UK after having been granted asylum by the British courts on the grounds of his sexuality and on the grounds of the persecution that he faced in Uganda because of his sexuality. One of a small number of people granted asylum on those grounds, but now the law having changed or a precedent having been agreed by the Supreme Court, having been handed down by the Supreme Court to say that that is now a grounds for being given asylum in Britain. And John, you've been here on and off, and you'll maybe tell a bit of that story since 2001, but you were granted asylum in 2009.
Yes, yeah.
Great. And Jonathan Cooper OBE, who is a human rights lawyer, focusing in particular these days on the issue of law with respect to same-sex conduct, as you put it. Jonathan has a non-governmental organisation focusing on human rights law called the Human Dignity Trust, which reviews and comments on and takes up cases in respect of countries that criminalise homosexuality around the world. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. A little bit about the film clip we're going to show. It's a clip from the BBC World Debate series, which I produced from Johannesburg, and it's not yet been broadcast, so you are going to be the first people to see this programme. As far as I know, at the moment, you wouldn't be able to see it in the UK anyway, because it's on the BBC World News channel. And this particular programme is not broadcast in the UK, but you can see it online and elsewhere on the BBC website. Thanks to the BBC for agreeing to let you watch this today. I have travelled, this is the second world debate that I've produced, one on poverty in Africa, one on sexuality, this one on sexuality. And producing the debates has taken me from Joburg, where I'm based, to several other countries. Swaziland first, with its well-known king and his ceremonies with the maidens and the reed dances, and off to Uganda, which in particular we focus on in this programme, but also to Malawi, a country where a homosexual couple were recently imprisoned and then released after international pressure, pardoned by the president. And finally, before finishing the programmes, I found myself in a country with a hereditary monarchy where the biggest story of the year, one of the biggest stories I discovered, is the marriage forthcoming of a prince. And another prince is accused of keeping company with friends who are into underage young women. I just say this because we're talking about Africa and morality and this issue of the intersection or potential clash between culture and modernity. This is the question I've been thinking about a lot over the last 6 months, and here we are in Britain with our peculiar position on some of those issues. So when we're talking about Africa, we might want to reflect on where we are and where we're coming from. I'm going to play you 2 or 3 little clips from the programme. It'll be a little bit start-stop. It'll be a little bit discontinuous, because that's the nature of the thing, and because Flora tells me, and others have said, you don't want to sit and watch the entire 47 minutes of the programme, because we've got good things to talk about instead. So let me play you those clips. We do have the potential, if we need to, if people want to, of dipping in to see another little clip from the programme, at a later stage, if there's something we're discussing that is raised by the people on the panel. I'll start from the beginning of the programme, so you'll see who's on the panel. It includes, in particular, the legislator in Uganda who's been working on and promoting and trying to pass very strong, some of the strongest anti-homosexuality laws in Africa. Does anybody want to say anything or ask any questions about what you're going to see? We go ahead and play that, and then we'll have a discussion, questions and comments afterwards.
Here in Johannesburg, the Constitutional Court is required to uphold South Africa's Bill of Rights, granting equality to all regardless of sexual orientation. However, right across Africa, gay people can face persecution, imprisonment, or even death. In this BBC World Debate, we ask, is homosexuality un-African? I'm Zainab Badawi. Welcome to Johannesburg for what promises to be a lively debate on an increasingly controversial topic. Along with our studio audience, we're joined on our panel by Ugandan MP David Bahati from the country's ruling party. He's the main force behind a proposed anti-homosexuality bill that in some cases would see homosexuals imprisoned for life. Festus Mogae, President of Botswana for 10 years until 2008, he now backs decriminalization of gay people, but is criticized for not doing more when he was in power. Paula Akugizibwe, an African thinker, public health activist and poet from Rwanda, who's lived and worked right across the continent. Siddiqa Tunde Lawal is a leader of the Ansar-ud-Din Youth Association of Nigeria, a Muslim group with branches across the length and breadth of Nigeria. Eusebius Makaiser, a writer on gay issues, a talk show host and a philosophy lecturer based at the Centre for Ethics at Wits University here in Johannesburg. That is our panel. Along with our invited audience of gay rights activists are religious groups opposed to homosexuality. Welcome to you all. Now, before we start our discussions on homosexuality in Africa, let us just set the scene for you. The BBC's Kevin Wachiro has this overview. By the way, some viewers may find some of the images in this report disturbing.
Gay pride on the streets of Durban. South Africa has gone further than any other country in the world by enshrining gay rights in its constitution. But this legal protection doesn't always guarantee that people enjoy these rights in practice. This is Millicent Gaika. In May last year, she became the latest lesbian in South Africa's poor black townships to be subjected to a brutal sexual attack. Like many other lesbians, she underwent an ordeal known as corrective rape, carried out by gangs of youth who claim they intend converting their victims to heterosexuality. These attacks take place despite South Africa's laws aimed at protecting gay people. In 13 other African countries, homosexuality is also permitted by law. But in the remaining 38 African nations, being gay is a crime. In 3, it is punishable by the death penalty. Nowhere is the debate more polarized than here in Uganda.
It is a sin. You can't have sex with another man. This is really contrary to God.
I'm also against homosexuality because it's totally against our culture. Life imprisonment. It's a fair what? It's a fair punishment.
Where do these attitudes come from? One place is the church. Pastor Martin Semper preaches to students at Makerere University in Kampala.
The standard is a man is to marry what? A woman, and the two shall become one. Therefore, if you have others, such as a man with another man, you are falling short of the standard. A man with an animal, a donkey, a goat, you are falling short of the... Jesus laid the standard.
Last year, a Ugandan newspaper published the names and photographs of 100 alleged homosexuals and called for them to be hanged. The newspaper's editor, Giles Muhami, claims that homosexuals in Uganda recruit young people, encouraging them to be gay. It's this practice which he says justifies the death penalty.
In my view, I also support this man. He should be hanged.
You would like to see
yes, and the hanging should be public.
The newspaper's publication of the identity of alleged homosexuals coincided with a new anti-gay bill introduced into Uganda's parliament by lawmaker David Bahati. It calls for life imprisonment for homosexuals and the death penalty for aggravated or repeated cases. If his bill were to become law, all Ugandans would be required to report homosexuals to the authorities. Similar anti-gay initiatives continue to be discussed in other African countries. Sylvia Tamale has conducted research into the history of same-sex relationships in Africa. She rejects the view that homosexuality is un-African.
Gay people have always lived among communities. Everyone, in the village would know that so-and-so, sleeps with another man, but they were not vilified. They were not praised, but they were not vilified. That's my point. So all these anti-gay sentiments came from outside.
Najib is a gay Ugandan man who lives in the slum of Bwaise in Kampala. He runs a support group for young gay men and women in his area. He believes that Uganda's lawmakers have their priorities wrong.
We are gays because we are made to be gays. It's what we feel. The world can't stop Bahati from being a straight guy to turn to be a gay. It's the way he can't stop me, or he can't stop us from being gays. This is our life, and this is my life in particular. I really love it, and I'm really proud of it. I really feel comfortable with guys. I've never felt women. So how will you force me to feel something?
So we've set the scene there. David Bahati, like it or not, homosexuality is there in Africa. You cannot say it is un-African, can you?
It's un-African because it is inconsistent with African values of procreation, of a belief in the continuity of family and clan.
So the existence of homosexuals in Africa, you think, is compromising population growth in Africa? Is that what you're saying?
Certainly.
It is? Can you give us a figure on that, Mr. Bahati?
No, I do not have to give you the figure because homosexuality is illegal in our country, and therefore there's no way we can capture this figure into our statistics.
Is it about 30 million people live in Uganda?
We have 33 million people
33 million in
Uganda.
Uganda, and you think that's not enough? You think your population's being compromised by the existence of homosexuals?
The key issue is it is inconsistent with our belief of continuity of family and clan.
All right.
That's key.
Festus Mahai, is homosexuality un-African?
No, because there are homosexuals in Africa as elsewhere. It does appear that homosexuality has always existed.
Paula, you have lived in several countries right across Africa. In your view, do you think that there is this kind of common position that homosexuality is either African or un-African?
I think it varies. I mean, but like Romochai said, it has always been with us, and ideological prejudice has also always been with us. So the question of whether it's African or not is really just a question of whether we want to cling to the ideological prejudice or whether we want to let people have the right to experience their own humanity. You can't change human nature, but culture is about how you respond to it. So I would say homophobia is the un-African thing because homophobia creates a culture of hatred, it creates a culture of intolerance, and that has no space in our continent.
Siddique, so homosexuality is African, it's homophobia that is un-African. From an African and Muslim perspective, what's your view?
Well, I think homosexuality is un-African, first of all, because even though it's something that is human nature, it's not something that we have promoted. It's not something that in Africa naturally is seen as something deviant. People have the natural instincts, yes, but over centuries, even though we have had homosexuals over the years, over the centuries, they've not come out. It's not something we're used to in the African continent. And so when people say,
you're saying you're all right with homosexuals existing as long as they're quiet about it?
Yes, because I think it offends the sensibility of others around.
Why does it affect the sensibilities of others?
Because it's something that's over just recently now that they're starting to make it so public. Let me put it like that.
And then homophobia, Paula says that's the thing that is actually un-African. I mean, would you agree with that?
Well, I think nobody should attack anybody based on their natural instincts or whatever they feel like doing. As long as they're adults, they're consenting to it, people should leave others too.
And then, what about from a Muslim perspective? Because Nigeria has got around a dozen states that base their law on Sharia law, where if a man indulges in homosexuality, it is actually punishable by death. A lesbian would get 6 months in prison and 50 lashes. Well, is that something you like? You like the idea of that?
Talking as a Muslim, homosexuality falls in the category of things that are forbidden, strictly. No, it is not allowed. It is haram.
Yubi, I mean, I have to say to you that when Sadiqa says something like, actually, the majority of people's sensibilities are affronted when it comes to that very assertive gay agenda that we do see in Western countries, and it is that which is un-African. Fair point.
Not at all, Zainab. I mean, when I listen to David and also Sadiqa, what I hear is basically a tissue of irrational argument and hatred. And where does one even start? Let's start with David's point of view. This idea that African values is all about procreation and we're all a bunch of sex machines is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Okay? What does David have to say to a straight couple who's sterile that they should feel less African because they can't give birth to kids? What about a gay couple that have decided, actually, I want to have a kid, but I want to continue living in the same-sex relationship the day after I've spawned one? Will you be more comfortable with that person? It's just a badly thought-through point of view. And the same with Sadiqa's. I mean, this idea of the 2 points that she's mentioned, firstly, that I get offended. Well, I get offended by homophobes. Does that mean that he must go into the closet, as it were? No. We all have the right to exist. The fact that you are aesthetically insulted by looking at 2 people who are in the same-sex relationships, who are holding hands in public, that's neither here nor there. Why should I be condoning your homophobia?
Sadiqa, are you offended by this gentleman here?
No.
But he's just told you he is a gay man working in gay activism, and he wants to be open about it. Well, are you offended by him?
No, I'm not. The display of their how do I put it now?
Position.
The public display of, that's what I mean by
public display. Yes. 2 men kissing in public, for instance. You don't like that?
Thing. One would ordinarily accept it from a straight couple.
Do you accept that, perhaps? I mean,
do
you want the right to kiss somebody, a male partner or boyfriend in public?
Well, of course I do. I mean, it's a good start. I'm not about to be lashed for what I'm doing. If it was up to her. But the real question, Sadiqa, is this. Do you accept that the fact that you are offended in terms of your sensibilities, do you accept that there's no basis for public policy and for laws, that it's your own private viewpoint, and I respect your entitlement to have it, but you wouldn't co-sign your name to a bill by David? Do you accept that?
I won't co-sign my name to a bill like that.
All right, we'll develop that point later. Before I go to our...
So I'm going to fast forward a little bit and give you the highlights of the rest of the show, if that's okay. Bear with me for 2 seconds while I do this.
How many wives do you have? Make it legal. How many wives?
Into it, people should leave others too.
And then, what about... make it legal.
I don't do the democracy.
Make it legal.
I don't do the democracy. I could only do what was feasible.
Did you try?
The majority of our people
make it
into it.
Make this thing. Oh, there we go. Sorry about this.
And using herbal remedies, and Kunzi uses ages-old medicine to treat patients, all sorts of ailments that they're suffering from. She's also a lesbian, married to Joanna, and they have an adopted daughter who you can see there. Nkunzi.
Yes, my dear.
Do you see any contradiction between being an African traditional healer and also a married lesbian?
I don't see any contradiction. For me, I am the child of the values. My ancestors, they accept me the way I am, and they allow me to have a wife.
This is your wife, Joanna, next to you there. You've celebrated, is it 3 years you've been married now?
Definitely.
Joanna. And do you have people who say, oh, I'm not going to go to Ngunzi because, you know what, she's a lesbian and she's got a wife? Do you have people who are slightly turned off by that?
But I do have clients who are older men, and when they come to me, they're like, definitely, you are helping us. And they accept my sexuality. I even got trainees, students that I'm training who are straight. And they came to me to be trained to become a traditional healer.
You two just stand up for me. You stand up for me. Nkunzi and your wife, Joanna. David. Sidika. Stay standing. No, actually, come here. Come here. Does anybody have a problem? Does anybody have a problem with these two ladies? Sidika, you have a problem. You have a problem. David Bahati, you have a problem with two ladies like this. You would have a problem.
Well, I'm actually uncomfortable proceeding forward.
Yeah, uncomfortable. Okay, but they have adopted a child presumably who was in a home.
She was suffering. Basically, when we found the child, she was definitely not in a good state.
So there you are. You've got a gay couple here who are actually helping a child that was abandoned for whatever reason. So they are helping the family values which you say you adhere to.
We do recognize that there are countries which have which recognize homosexuality as a human right. And in South Africa, certainly we do that. But this is something that we shall not allow in our country.
All right,
and
okay.
We should be respected.
Sit down, ladies. Thank you very much, ladies. Okay. I have to say, though, Nkunzi and Joanna, a fellow South African here, Chief Luvivai, he is chief of the Venda people. What's your view? You describe yourself also as a traditional South African. What about homosexuality? In your view, is it African or is it un-African?
In actual fact, you must remember that a culture is dynamic. It changes and it moves with time. But however, there are some things that we cannot change them when it comes to the culture, more especially the value and the morals. We must look at the end results of this action that was happening here. What is going to inform our young children? Are we going to have a sustainability population? We as traditional leaders look after the customs and the value of our African people. We cannot allow that.
You cannot allow same-sex. You don't like same-sex relationships. What do you call your traditional family values here then? Polygamy, for instance, is something which is very common in African tribal society. You're saying that that's okay, a man can have 3, 4, 5 wives? Is that okay?
It is okay.
Is okay? How many wives do you have? How many wives do you have?
I've got 1 wife married officially now, and I'm still having 2 to marry.
So you are a defender of polygamy because you think it's traditional African culture and you think it's right. How many children do you have? How many children do you have?
I've got 4 children.
4 children, okay.
So imagine if I was promoting what
4 official children?
Yeah, official.
How many unofficial?
I don't have an official. What I would like to elaborate is that, what about if during my time, if I came across with this situation, it means that I will be not having the kids. And then what is going to be a continuity of my chieftainship? Because there will be nobody called to take over.
So you're agreeing with David Bahati here?
Yes.
Okay. Make it legal.
Then we'll start our discussion. Oops. This DVD player is not...
I'm not a pro.
Sorry.
Make it legal.
I will do the democracy.
Make it legal.
People should live others too.
And then, so.
We'll get there, sorry. By the time I've done this, you might as well just watch the whole show. I don't mind. I think the Frontline Club will have DVDs of the whole show after it's been broadcast by the BBC, so folks who want to take it home and watch it themselves can get copies. I want to play you finally a clip where we focus on Festus Machais, because that's quite interesting, his history of what he did and didn't do when he was president of Botswana. He's now come out as a strong voice, probably the strongest voice in Africa, calling for decriminalization. Oops. I just can't make this do what I want it to do.
Therefore, I did not specifically, I'm not a gay activist. I'm not a pro-gay activist. No. I say, well, I don't understand the preference, the sexual preference, but they are entitled to it. And that therefore they should not be discriminated against, it should not be criminalized.
But why were you a president? Did you why did you not make it legal when you were president?
I ruled in a democracy. I could only do what was feasible.
Did you try?
The majority of our people are still opposed. So I must convince them first, before changing the law unilaterally. And when I was president, even without changing the law, I gave instructions to our police. They stopped arresting or harassing lesbians.
Monica is a gay rights activist from Botswana, Mr. President.
Yes.
Mr. Morai, with due respect, I believe that you had the power when, for 10 years, you could have changed the law. You could have at least brought up the matter within Parliament or within the policymakers to at least try and change. That would never happen. So I think that's the fundamental problem that we have is the effort that you're putting in now, we never actually felt it in the country, at home, when you had the power to change things.
When we see, Mr. Mahai, I want to ask you, when you see the Kenyan Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, saying homosexuals should be arrested and put in prison, Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe has compared them to dogs and pigs, then he said, oh, I'm sorry I said that, it's an insult to dogs and pigs. That's the kind of rhetoric you can get from African leaders. So why this reticence? Why do they create this climate?
I did not, and she, my compatriot, she was not persecuted or arrested during my term of office. So that's what I did. But I could not change the law because that had been necessarily stirring up a hornet's nest.
But why are African leaders, Mr.
I was not willing to lose an election on behalf of the gays. But
is that true?
Yes.
Okay, wait. He's being honest.
Listen.
And do you think, Mr. Mohai, that...
And I discussed with my cabinet.
Okay, can I ask you, Mr. Mohai, are other African presidents, you've spoken to many over 10 years, did they have, even those who wanted to support gay rights, felt, I don't want to lose an election, it's not worth it? Did a lot of them make that point to you?
No, they haven't. We haven't talked about
Did you not discuss...
Except only now, those who make proposals similar to my brothers here, those are the ones that I engage, or are my brother. Now you are going too far.
Okay, Yubi, are you disappointed that political leaders...
All right.
Are you disappointed that political leaders are not more forthcoming, or do you accept that they don't want to lose elections?
No, I don't accept it. I'm deeply disappointed, and I was hoping, as cute as the admission is, and good for TV, I'm hoping that Mr. Mohai will at least accept that his attitude retrospectively is deeply immoral, because by saying that you're not willing to lose an election for the gay minority, you make it sound like it's a political strategy, but it's much more simple. You weren't willing to lose an election even if it meant affirming the dignity and equality of all people in your country.
You are right. Now you are taking just a minute. Now you are talking nonsense, because my people, during my rule, their dignity was not affronted. They were never arrested. They were never insulted. They were never harassed.
Mr. Mohai, no, that's not good enough.
Your judgment.
When the law says to me, you see this McKaiser, as a gay man, what you do is illegal and it's immoral, that is undermining my dignity. The fact that behind the scenes you call up a policeman and say, dude, don't arrest Eusebius on the streets, it's not good enough, because the message that the law signals in itself affirms homophobia, and for that you should take moral accountability.
I agree that the law...
Okay. You want to watch more, would you? That's good. We like to show you just a little bit, then you'll come back for more. Thank you. Sorry that it misbehaved there as we went along. Just whilst Jonathan's getting his microphone on there, the part you missed, just to make you really want to see the whole programme, was the slightly Jerry Springer moment. There was a small riot at one stage during the show where one of the gay rights organisations, the Coalition of African Lesbians, had enough of David Bahati and tried to wrestle Zainab's mic from her. But, it was quite interesting to see that people were willing to come and engage with him, people whose existence is threatened by David Bahati were willing to come and have a conversation. Some of the organisations just for your information, we as the producers, with support from the BBC, we invited 50 gay rights activists and 50 religious conservatives and 50 people just came as members of the public. And the gay rights activists held a protest outside, held a picket outside, but then as the show started, they finished their picket and walked in and came to have a conversation with him. So they demonstrated, but then came to have a conversation. Shall we start with a question, John Bosco, about sort of public opinion in Africa and the gay rights movement in Africa? Because Festus Mohai, I think that's a bit of a headline there. Festus Mohai says he wasn't willing to lose an election for gay people in Africa. That, I suppose, is him saying, look, Africans are not on board with gay rights being human rights, and he's suggesting he wasn't able to do anything about that. Is that a fair criticism, that the gay rights movement in Africa has sort of failed to penetrate into the majority of people, and that's the reason why people can get away with these laws that they are passing?
I think in Africa there's no democracy. That's one of the things which is affecting the African countries. Many people have been persecuted. Let's not talk about homosexuals. There are so many, even women or children. There's no democracy. But when it comes to homosexuals, it's really, really hard because there's no one backing up the gay people or lesbians. Even now, the new law which is coming out is going to be hard for the parents of gay people, because if you a son or a daughter of somebody who is gay, you can be arrested for that. If you a teacher teaching a gay student, you can be arrested for that. So you find it really hard that if you're a landlord and you don't report a gay person within 24 hours, you can be arrested up to 3 years. So if you were a teacher, if you were a landlord or anything, you feel scared to say anything about gay issues. Many radios in Uganda have been closed down if they discuss anything about gay issues or lesbians. So you find even if somebody, even the family members, if they wanted to help their son or their daughter because they are gay, they find it hard to help. They keep a closed eye, pretend as if they are not interested. Not only the people, the activities, even gay people, because as I'm talking now, if I was in Uganda, I wouldn't say in public that I'm gay because I don't want to be killed. So even gay people in Uganda, they can walk on the street with placards saying, oh, we don't want gay people, because you can't support them, you will be killed. So it's not only the gay people, the activities, but everybody as well.
I mean, just so people have the information, the law that David Bahati has been trying to pass, it's in its second reading, I think, in the Ugandan parliament, and he says now that the ruling party have won the elections again, he's going to go back and, with renewed vigour, try to pass that law. That's what he said at the end of our show. It says, as you were saying, that doctors, health professionals, teachers, lawyers, everybody in Ugandan society would have to report somebody who they know to be homosexual, I think within 24 hours. 24 hours. And if they fail to do so, then they are committing a crime and I think can be subject to imprisonment. So it breaks through everything like patient-doctor confidentiality and all of those sort of things. I wanted to push this point of sort of, politicians versus the people. Why is David Bahati doing this, do you think, John Bosco? Why is he doing it? Is it about his Christian conservatism? Is it about political popularity? What do you think it's about?
When I was in Uganda, I didn't know anything about David Bahati. Even when he was the MP, nobody knew about him. He came out with something which every Ugandan wanted to hear. And now he came out with the gay people, because most of the Ugandans, they don't like gay people. So now he took on that topic to be known. And that's why even he won his seat in the parliament. As you've seen the clip, the ex-president said that he didn't want to lose his votes. That's the same thing. And we have so many things in Uganda where people say if we have gay people, we will not have more people in the country. But in Uganda, or not in Uganda, all over the world, we have Catholic priests. They don't get married. You can't tell me we will not have more priests. So that's the way they do it. You see, because I remember when I was in primary, we used to have debates where we say mother is better than father. So that's the same childish discussion the MPs they have. Because my parents, they've never told me whether we had uncle or a brother who is gay. But I ended up being a gay in the family. So you don't have to be gay to produce another gay. So the gay can be produced by heterosexuals. But the Uganda, they don't really understand. Maybe they understand, but they close their eyes because they want popularity and also to be in power, as we've had in the film.
And in fact, one of the bits you didn't see in the debate is that one of David Bahati's main arguments against homosexuality in Uganda is that gay people are recruiting children. He thinks that somehow it's existing gay people who are recruiting children to become gay with support from money from Western donors. That's an argument that he makes. But let's move on from this a little bit. We'll maybe come back to politicians and what can be done. And Jonathan, can you tell us where his initiative stands in terms of international law? He said in our programme, I'm on safe ground, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the African Charter on Humans and People's Rights doesn't refer to sexuality, and therefore you have to respect me when I tell you our culture is anti-gay, we can pass laws, you know, you have to respect that. You work on this.
Sure. Well, as a matter of international human rights law, to criminalise consensual same-sex sexual conduct is a violation of a number of rights guaranteed in international human rights law. Essentially, it boils down to the notion of dignity, which is there in the African Charter of Human and People's Rights, and privacy. Now, interestingly, privacy isn't part of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, but it's part of other African human rights treaties. But privacy is part of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, a treaty that Uganda has ratified, and it's the idea that part of privacy protects our identity. Our identity includes our sexual identity, and a sexual identity will include a lesbian and gay sexual identity. And so therefore, to criminalise sexual conduct of anyone, if it's consensual sexual conduct, will violate the right to respect for private life, will undermine the right to dignity, and in a lesbian and gay context, it will amount to discrimination, and it will also amount to an arbitrary interference with the enjoyment of your rights. So it is a fundamental violation of human rights standards across the board. And so the reality is those, I think they said 31 countries in Africa that still criminalise...
38.
Sorry, 38. Those 38 countries that still criminalise homosexuality, they are in breach of their own international human rights treaty obligations, they're in breach of their own constitutional law provisions, and they're in breach of the rule of law. And the reality is it's a matter of, I mean, there's a debate to be had, should these things change through litigation or should they change through the legislative process? I think the President was quite interesting on that. And it's an interesting debate. How should you bring about this kind of change? I think it's perfectly acceptable that these changes are brought about through litigation. The majority of rights in this jurisdiction for lesbian and gay and transgendered people, they've been brought about through litigation, not through legislation. And it just settles into the legal framework. In fact, across Europe, both the European Union and the Council of Europe, lesbian and gay rights have been guaranteed through litigation, not legislation.
I want to ask you about that, and then we'll open up to the audience. Is that sustainable when gay rights are achieved through a quick legal fix, as opposed to, you know, a big discussion and process in society? And I say this because in South Africa, of course, our constitution goes further than any other to guarantee those rights, it outlaws discrimination on the basis specifically of sexual orientation. And yet I say with confidence that that is not a view supported by the majority of South Africans. It is certainly true that if there was a referendum in South Africa, South Africans would not only vote to recriminalise homosexuality, but they would vote to outlaw abortion again and introduce the death penalty. So, if you do a fix in the law, is that sustainable?
Well, that's why a true democracy or a truly democratic society, or a society that aspires to be a truly democratic society, is one that has regular elections and has a legislature which is responsible for lawmaking. But it also will have fundamental human rights principles, because you need to ensure that you have a kind of counter-majoritarian tool that protects the vulnerable and the marginalised. I mean, we saw it last year in Europe, where the French suddenly decided to attack the Roma. The French president decided to attack the Roma. And therefore you need human rights protection to actually ensure that those vulnerable groups, people that don't have a voice, who can't have a voice in a kind of standard notion of democracy, have equal protection of the law and protection of their rights.
Questions and comments from the audience? Yeah, over there first.
Thank you. My name's Michael. I was interested. I was a little bit shocked about the title. A gay rights un-African.
Is homosexuality
homosexual un-African? I came to a very interesting talk here with Gary Young, who's the Guardian correspondent in the US, who's just written a really good book about who we are in the 21st century and identity. And as an Englishman, as a European, I like to who is an African? And I was interested that in your debate you didn't have any frame about why would Africa be any different from anywhere else? And if so, why is Africa different? Why are 38 countries, why do they still have legislation like this? So, thank you.
Okay. Should we take a few questions and then we can have a few comments on some questions?
Hi, my name's also Mike. I just had a question really about, as you're probably aware, about David Kato, who was murdered in Uganda last month. And just, I guess I had a question about what's the situation now as in the light of his death in terms of gay activism and the general sort of population, what they're feeling about that, but also whether that was the programme was made in time to discuss that issue, because I couldn't find a greater example of what homophobia in Africa means.
Good. Should we take one more and then we'll come to another round?
Yeah, my name's not Mike. My name's Feroz from Pambazuka News. I had a really lovely email from an activist in Uganda, which said, if you really want to prevent the rise of the gay movement, you have to blame the straight parents who keep having gay babies. And I think this is a point that needs to be put across to someone like Bahati. Yes, that actually what that is going to be doing is to criminalize parents, because it's going to be a fundamental issue. I think this issue about the title is also problematic. Is Christianity African? I think that's a much more profound question to be asked in this context. I was very pleased that you interviewed Sylvia Tomale. And if I can make us a little commercial break, we're about to publish a book by her called African Sexuality as a Reader. And it is profoundly, it's a real confrontation to the whole concept about sexuality in Africa, and even challenges the concepts of a binary nature of sexuality. And I think raises some really important empirical information about the history of sexuality in Africa, which goes back thousands of years. And none of this behavior is new. One of the big shortcomings of Africans is that they are humans. Thank you.
Thanks. And should we take that? There was another chap. Yeah, and then we'll conclude the round.
I think I was going to... my name is Peter Grester. I'm a BBC journalist based in East Africa, covering Kenya. And it was actually more of an observation. I had the same question about African values, and so I'll turn that into an observation that it seems to me that the debate should be more about religious issues, religious conservatism across Africa, than specifically about some kind of generic idea of a homogenous African culture. I mean, I just wanted to turn that, I guess, into a question. Is this about religion rather than about culture?
Good. So,
I just add a little bit on
very quick.
The question about why I wanted to ask about it being un-African. That sounds like un-American, and I don't know if it's pure hearsay, that part of the kind of recurrent spate of homophobia in some African countries has been stoked up by fundamentalist Christian churches from the US. I mean, is that just hearsay, or is there any founding in that?
Yeah. So obviously, I have to say this, because I'm the producer, so I would say this, which is that the 20 minutes you didn't watch was all about the questions you've just asked. So there was 20 minutes of the programme about whether or not you can talk about something being African or not anyway, and whether it's all about religious conservatism being brought in from the US. But it's good I didn't play that, because otherwise you'd have had no questions to ask.
Yeah,
David Kato.
David Kato was a gay man and a gay activist in Uganda who was killed on the 26th of January this year. David Kato was one of the guys who was published by the Rolling Stone newspaper on the front page saying, "Hang the gays." This guy was killed in his own house. The international organization, everything condemned Uganda why David Kato was killed. The government have arrested a suspect, as they call him. But all the news and the police, they are saying the guy who killed Kato, because Kato was forcing him sex, that's why he killed him. In some interview, they said Kato helped this guy to have somewhere to live. Others, they say, this guy, he slept with Kato for 3 days and he demanded a house, a money, and a car. So there's no specific reason why they killed him. And they are still saying it was due to robbery. They are saying they killed him because they wanted to take stuff from his house. But it was daylight, 1:00 p.m. in a sunny day in Uganda. So there's no way somebody could tell the truth. But the government is covering up. They have not come up with anything at all.
But it matters to them what this was. If it is found to be a hate crime, then it sort of is not in favour of the Bahati camp because it's showing the violence that it's perpetuating in the society. So the authorities are at some pains to try and make clear that this wasn't a hate crime, in other words.
What they are trying to do has nothing to do with Kato being gay. It was due to robbery. They wanted to take things from Kato. So the government is trying to back up the killer. And the killer, the way he's saying he was forced to have sex with him. You know. But it's somebody who drove the car up to Kato's house and killed him and walked away. And this gives you a picture how many gay people have been killed in Uganda. The reason we knew Kato, because it was in the public eye. But there are so many who have been killed.
Can I just pick up on, I mean, one of the interesting things about the tragedy that happened to David Kato is that you saw law being used very effectively with the Rolling Stone case. The Rolling Stone was injuncted by the Ugandan courts and prevented from publishing people's names and addresses. And so you saw law in action and working very, very effectively to protect people's rights. And obviously it was unable to do it comprehensively, but you saw the Ugandan courts responding to their own constitutional obligations, their own privacy obligations, and it worked. You know, and so it's not another step, or it's not a stretch of the imagination then to say, well, it can work further when we actually start challenging the laws that do criminalise.
Jonathan, how about this issue of the fundamentalists in the US? I mean, you're working in lots of countries with your... Do you see a pattern? Do you think there is a push? I mean,
I'm not really equipped to answer that,
yeah.
But I've heard the same stories, and they seem very plausible.
Yeah, there is well-known information. In fact, the main guy who's been looking into the links between the Ugandan churches, I don't know if you want to say anything about this, John Bosco, but...
When I was in 2008, I was deported from this country. I was beaten up, handcuffed, dragged to the plane, deported back to Uganda.
This country?
From UK to Uganda. When I went to Uganda, I was handed over to the police in Uganda. I was arrested, beaten up. The day I was brought back by the UK government again, who took me back to Uganda. It's the same day when we had the American embassy in Uganda debating about the homosexuals in Uganda. These people, from America, they give money to the pastors in Uganda to preach hatred about gay people. They put a lot of money up within the pastors, the way they talk about gay people. So this bill is being sponsored mostly by the churches in America. And the most hatred is preached in churches than even in any other places. Because we've recently, in Uganda, they had the elections, but nobody discussed anything about gay people or lesbians, but this is mostly in churches. And what makes it really hard is like the church is the one telling people to kill other people. And some of these pastors, they even blame other pastors saying, oh, your church, you train gay people. They have so many words, the way they use words to say gay people are training, gay people are given membership to join the club. You know, so they really don't understand. They say you recruit people, all these American words, which they put is like brainwashing the Ugandan pastors to preach around. But the more hatred is coming from America. That's why we gay Africans, we are just wondering, why did the Americans go to Africa to kill the gay people before they have healed the gay people in America? Because they are gay in America. Before you tell somebody to clean their face, first look at your face. But the Americans, they go to Africa to say you have to preach these people so that they heal from gay people. But there are so many gay people and organizations in America.
The chap who's documented a lot of this, Jeff Charlotte, who wrote a book about an organisation called The Family, people probably have heard about it. Bahati acknowledges his membership. In fact, he's one of two of the leading members of this organisation called The Family, which is an international Christian organisation which has membership of some US senators, Republican Christian senators, and has a residence actually very famous in the States in these debates in Washington, where some lawmakers live. It's a sort of little gathering of right-wing Christian lawmakers, and Bahati is linked to them definitely. But his anti-gay legislation in Uganda has divided the right-wingers in the States, because some of them are saying, well, he's gone too far, we can't support this. They only came out and said that when pushed very hard. But definitely there are documented links between these right-wingers in the States and him. Yep, at the back there.
Hi, my name's not Mike. I'm Dan. My question is, why is this a political issue in African states? The debate so far has seemed to focus on it as a kind of a social reaction, a reaction by people, by religious groups. These religious groups obviously also operate in the UK. You gave the statistic of the death penalty in South Africa. The death penalty in the UK, were it to go to referendum, would also be voted. Most people would vote in favour of it, and yet you don't have these same sorts of legislative contests that are ongoing in Africa at the moment. So my question is: so why is it a political issue in Africa when it's not here?
Good.
I was just wondering, in the introduction of the program, there was the university professor, the lady who was talking about how historically homosexuality has existed for years and years and years. And I was wondering kind of the forms in which it existed, so that it was kind of people wouldn't talk about it, and it was just like that uncle that was gay that everybody knew about. Does that still exist in societies, like in Uganda, for example, or is it different in urban spaces and in rural spaces, or kind of what's your experience of that?
Yep, and then at the back there.
Hi there. Yeah, I just had, it's a two-part question really. Is it pretty much accepted that the bill, that David Bahati is proposing, will get passed? Is that pretty much a given that it will get passed in Uganda? And secondly, Jonathan, if it is passed, can it be challenged from a legal basis, and who would instigate that challenge?
John Tosh, Roehampton University. Uganda has a particularly significant history with regard to this issue. The first Christians to be put to death for their faith were page boys at the Kabaka's court in 1886 who resisted the Kabaka's sexual advances. And that, I think, partly accounts for the strong position, the extreme position taken by the main Christian churches in Uganda on this issue, which is seen as a kind of founding martyrdom for their faith. But at the same time, it also raises the question of whether traditionally, before the colonial period and before the Christian era, homosexuality was in fact quite commonplace amongst the royal elite of Uganda. And the Kabaka, in treating his pages in this way, was simply acting according to traditional standards. So my question to John Bosco is whether that makes sense as an interpretation of Uganda's history.
You'll be reassured to know that somebody in the 20 missing minutes of the debate made exactly that contribution, so that was raised in our debate too. I realise I forgot to answer one question from the earlier round, which is the title we chose is Homosexuality Un-African, very strange title. And it was very deliberate to force us to have this kind of a conversation, to force us to say, you know, can you say something is un-African? Because that's what Bahati's saying. That's what is being argued. So we wanted to, you know, have that conversation on sort of their terrain, if you like, and raise the questions. Can you say something's un-African? Is it actually about religion? What about Africa before Christianity? And so on. Let's come to the questions that were just asked. Why is this a political issue in Uganda? Why do politicians gain so much mileage from targeting homosexuals rather than other ways they might gain popularity?
Still back to the clip, you've seen the ex-president has said because he wants the votes and he knows the number of people who are anti-gay. So the only way to win the votes is going to talk about a gay issue because he knows people, they hate it. There are so many other issues in Uganda, but because people, they don't see them as a problem, they just keep quiet. You know? So that makes it more political, just to gain votes, even if they are not even interested, but just to get a vote, they can talk about it.
And gay King Mwanga II of the Buganda people, is that a good understanding? And how's life these days for ordinary gay people out of the spotlight of politics? Is it just, you know, normal around the country?
I was not there at that time, but I know some history of it. I heard that the King Mwanga in Uganda, he was gay, and he used to sleep with the young men in his palace. But because of the cultural values, he was forced to get married by his relatives and families. And when he refused to marry, they wanted to take his kingdom. By keeping his throne and everything, he managed to get someone to marry, to have kids. Then in 1876, that's when the religion went in Uganda. The missionaries from Ireland, they went to Uganda in 1876. But this happened, even gay was already, when Mwanga was already gay. So it's not that gay started before the religion, but it was there even, it was there after when the religion was introduced to Uganda. So what I'm trying to say that gay people, they were there before the religion, but the religion were preaching more that they don't agree with the gay people. Maybe the reason why Mwanga killed the first missionaries in Uganda, because they were not accepting what he believed in. And that's why the first Christians were killed. But when they say about this gay is not a culture in Uganda, it's not, it has been introduced by Englishman. The Englishman went there when Mwanga was there. In fact, Mwanga was already dead because his son, who was Mutesa, is the one who invited the missionaries to go to Uganda. So this thing was there. Gay people, they were there before them. Then when we go back to say, maybe they say this is gay people is not African, the constitution which is running up to today in Uganda is a British constitution. They didn't, in their constitution which they had in Uganda, in the kingdoms, they didn't have any clause which says criminalize gay people. The British people, the first governor of Uganda was a British man. He is one who drafted the constitution which has a clause saying you kill gay people. So the constitution is not Ugandan, but gay are Ugandan.
Can I just pick up on that point that John Bosco just made? I mean, there are 50 countries in the Commonwealth. 41 of them still criminalise homosexuality. That's not a coincidence. And it was British colonial rule that introduced the criminalisation of homosexuality across the then empire. And it was British, the 1861 Offences Against the Persons Act, that was then applied to these colonial countries, and they retained those provisions once they got independence. And you know, the whole issue is a legacy of British colonial rule, and I don't think that's at all in dispute. But there's nothing African about criminalisation of homosexuality. It is a peculiarly British idea that the British then exported around the world, amongst other things that the British have decided to export around the world. And it is quite interesting, even when you look at how we ended up criminalising homosexuality in this jurisdiction. It happened in a late night debate where another David Barty, some miserable git, just managed to table an amendment. It passed through the committee procedure and was adopted, and the government at the time just thought, I can't be bothered to take this on, who cares, we'll let it run, and then it runs for the next 80 years. But of course the British then, in a more enlightened way, got rid of it, but by that point, in 1967, we'd managed to export it to 50 countries in the world, and you know, the obligation now is for us to put our energies into the decriminalisation process, which could either be done through legislation or litigation.
And that would apply to Uganda's law if it's passed.
Yeah, and that question, would you be able to challenge the Anti-Homosexuality Act, should it become an act? It would be challengeable through the courts of Uganda. I mean, the difficulty is always going to be who is going to be brave enough to bring the cases, but obviously people are going to be prosecuted. So these poor mothers and fathers and school teachers and doctors will be prosecuted, and their defence will include the unconstitutionality of the legislation. And so one would assume that that's how it will end up being ultimately successfully challenged before the courts. So.
I mean, I find it quite moving that Najib from the slum of Bouesse agreed to be on BBC TV around the world saying what he said in that film clip, because that certainly is not an easy thing for him to have decided to do, and he did it knowing that this is going to be shown all over the world, including in Uganda, because the BBC is in Uganda. So people are obviously brave enough to stand up despite what's going on. I wanted to make one observation about this issue of, you know, what's African and what isn't, and public opinion. You remember Chief Luvai of the Venda people with the nice hat? Yeah. Just obviously with my BBC producer hat on, I can't describe David Bahati as a miserable git, but Luvai is not a miserable git by anybody's stretch of the imagination. He's a fun guy who sort of recognises his own hypocrisy, is the phrase that I would use. As the camera zoomed into him and Zainab was about to ask him about what he thinks about gay people in South Africa, he had a big smile on his face. And I know him well enough to know why he had that smile on his face, because he knows he's a hypocrite. He actually considers this to be a sort of funny issue, you know, funny to talk about culture in South Africa, and sort of he knew that she was going to come at him about polygamy and, you know, other stuff that makes him hypocritical. So there's definitely in South Africa, I don't know so much in Uganda, a substantial section of the population that are sort of movable in one way or another and know that there's something wrong here, that there's something dissonant about sort of, you know, being polygamists and being anti-gay, or being patriarchal men and supposedly, you know, being in favour of the human rights that are in the Constitution. So there's definitely room for manoeuvre in South Africa that social movements could take advantage of, that a gay rights movement could take advantage of in changing public opinion. But I think Festus Mackay, for me, is proof of the fact that you need a movement as well as anything that you're doing, Jonathan.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I mean, litigation in and of itself is not the answer, but it can sort of break the back of an issue. And, you know, the issue, and we don't forget, Europe was deeply, deeply, deeply homophobic. And we do have to remember that just last year in this country, a gay man was kicked to death in Trafalgar Square. And so when we're talking about the vulnerability of being gay and lesbian, it's not just about being gay and lesbian in Africa, it's about being gay and lesbian in the United Kingdom as well. But, you know, homophobia in Europe, that was broken ultimately by a case going to the European Court of Human Rights.
Also, the gentleman at the back asked if this legislation, the bill is going to be passed. For sure, it's going to be passed, because what they are waiting for is just the elections. The elections are finished, because during the elections, they silenced everything. Nobody talked about the bill, nobody talked about the gay people. Now they are finished, they are going to bring it back in the parliament, and those are one of the bills which they want to pass. The reason why they are going to pass it, because the president is anti-gay. The first lady is anti-gay. Most of the people, the highest in power, maybe 10 highest positions, they are all anti-gay. So for that, the bill is going to be passed.
They do care what people say, though, don't they, John Bosco? Because in Malawi, of course, the president, pardoned. He said, "I don't approve of homosexuality, but I'm pardoning these guys on humanitarian grounds." This was after the protest by the British and others who have a big aid budget in Malawi. This was another case, And then in Uganda, we found a clip at the BBC of Museveni saying, I'm annoyed by all this talk of gays. When Gordon Brown phoned me the other day, all he wanted to talk to me about was gay people. When Ban Ki-moon spoke to me 2 weeks ago, all he wanted to talk to me about was gay people. Can't we, have conversations about anything else? So Museveni seems to be sort of, in two minds about this thing because of, the international relations implications of it. I'm just saying it's not, something can be done. I mean, pressure seems to make a difference for us.
I just feel, we have to be careful. Yes, there may have been all these...
There may have been all these negotiations with Gordon Brown, Ban Ki-moon and whatever. But I think you shouldn't take away the agency of the gay movement in Africa. I mean, the heroism that has been shown in Uganda, the heroism of people getting onto the streets, of publishing stuff, of writing about it, of speaking it at the World Social Forum, and speaking at all these other forums. That is what is bringing about the change. It isn't. It's those politicians who are responding to that. And I think if you take that away from the gay movement, then you're taking away quite a large amount of their capacity to change this situation.
But then tell us, Feroz, or anybody else, why the gay and lesbian movements in Africa haven't done more to change public opinion. Why haven't they been successful in creating a climate where it's harder for these politicians to get away with what they get away with?
I've been watching this situation for the last 10 years, and I've seen a dramatic change over the last 10 years. The number of gay activists, the number of gay organizations around Africa, the ones who are writing, speaking, and being active around this issue has increased enormously, and it's not a static issue. If one looks at, we've been covering this issue for 10 years in Pamazooka News, and I know 10 years ago there were very, very few who were willing to speak out. Today we are overwhelmed with the number of people who are willing to speak out and organize around this. And I think that's really important. I think we are living in a situation where things are going to change. And I think that's really important, and it's that kind of solidarity. Which is why I have this problem with this title. It's is hate un-African? That's a good question. To say is homosexuality in a sense plays into the prejudices, I'm afraid.
Okay, last round of comments or questions over there.
Hi there, my name's Ed. I'm just interested in finding out from the panel's views on is there a danger that protests against this bill and against sort of anti-homosexuality in Uganda from outside the country, and in particular the West, could actually undermine your sort of progress within the country? Is there a danger that people in Uganda think this is just a Western creation, and that complaints from outside the country is just some big conspiracy on the West's half?
Good question.
Good evening, I'm Caroline. I just wanted to ask about the criminal trial of the murderer of David Kato that's just been postponed again. I gather that it's going to take place, or the second trial has been rescheduled for the 17th of March. I just wondered what degree of optimism there is that the trial will bring to light any of these issues, and that somebody might actually be prosecuted for a crime, if not the correct crime.
Someone at the back there?
Hi, my name's Rachel, and I'm a master's student trying to write my thesis on something to do with this. So this is kind of where my interest comes from originally. And I guess the question that I was watching the programme about Scott Mills, the BBC, the Radio 1 DJ in Uganda, and he was talking a lot about talking to people about where the hatred comes from. And there seemed to be a suggestion that it's kind of like a Western disease, like it's something that they'd imported from the West, which obviously is the ultimate irony given colonial laws. But I kind of wonder why now, and where does it come from specifically at this point in time? And specifically, why does the international community care about this issue when it doesn't necessarily seem to care about all the other places in the world, like Iran or Egypt, where gay rights are not allowed? And sort of relate to that, then, how do you respond? If the law is spun as being a sort of defence of African values, or particularly Ugandan values, against Western imposition, how does the international community respond if that's kind of antithetical to that? I guess that's a kind of conundrum I'm interested in.
I'm afraid I think it might take your master's thesis to answer all those questions.
Hi, I'm Ethan, and my roommate right now is studying abroad in Cape Town. He's gay, and I was just wondering if there was any history of persecution of Americans or Europeans, or really any students or visitors to Africa who are gay, if there's any just thought process or history about that.
But in South Africa, it's legal and protected. Okay.
Well, if I just deal with that point just very quickly, there are examples of Americans and Europeans being prosecuted in jurisdictions that criminalise homosexuality, and they go to those jurisdictions and they get criminalised. There are prosecuted. There are examples of that, yeah. But obviously, it wouldn't happen in South Africa because it's one of the 13 jurisdictions that doesn't criminalise homosexuality.
There's an astonishing provision in David Bahati's bill that allows for the extradition of Ugandans back to Uganda if they, are in love with people of the same sex in other countries. I mean, I smile just because it's so ridiculous. David Kato's trial, any possible optimism, do you feel, John Bosco, that something will be found out and will help?
I doubt. I wouldn't say it won't, because I don't know. Because at first I didn't know the Kato will win the case when they mentioned his name in the newspaper. Luckily, he won his case, and he was entitled to $1 million shilling, which even he didn't have a chance to get. But with this one, because the more they are focusing on robbery, not hatred, so they are focusing on that. And the guy in his statement is insisting Kato was forcing him to have sex. So he is using that one also to protect himself. He's not going to change because he knows the government won't be on the side of a gay person. If he says he was forcing him sex, then that means he killed him to defend himself. So it will be like a self-defense.
And the issue of Westerners, Northerners, joining an international movement to pressure Uganda, could that backfire and add to these claims that it's all a bunch of gay people from outside who are trying to stop Uganda from
That's their view. That's their view, because they know, as a gay Ugandan, you can't stand on the street and say your voice. So, for example, now, talking about gay life in Uganda, because I'm not in Uganda, but if I was in Uganda, I wouldn't do anything. So Uganda will be saying that as the Western or the developed countries, they are promoting gay life in Uganda. But on the other hand, because the Ugandans, there's no way they can demonstrate on the streets on their own. So we're using the platform here to show the Ugandans, or some Ugandans, because there are some Africans who are in these countries who don't believe in gay life. And if they really can understand and hear, maybe they are the people who can preach back home and say gay people exist. We have friends who are gay. Being gay does not mean that you will be sleeping with somebody who is not gay. It's the way people say that if you're gay, the next thing they want to hide away their boys. Does not mean that a gay person, wherever you say a boy, you have to go with the boy. In Uganda, there are so many defilements with girls, but wherever they mention gay thing in Uganda, the next thing we are protecting our boys. They can't protect the girls, but they protect the boys. So if they are going to protect the boys, they have to protect the girls. But for them, they just say gay is a disease, gay is mental health. But if it is then mental health, they could accept, because we've accepted mental health is there. But they don't say it that way.
But as a public figure, now in the UK, if not an activist, you'd like to see an international movement that pressures Uganda.
Yes, I would love to get this backup from the developed countries, the Western and the other countries. But the issue is Ugandan going to know that? Because they will never show any this can't pronounce the word.
Dissent.
No, any demo. If somebody if people they are trying to campaign for the gay people in Uganda, those won't be shown in Ugandan television, or they will not talk about it. So even the Ugandans, they won't know what is happening. The only gay Ugandans who are now out, they are the people who are in the city where they can access radios or go to internet and hear the things. That's why now people in Uganda have started talking about gay issues, because of the media, because people, they can at least go to internet and get more information and get this and that. But before, it could not be told. That's why people, they are saying, we didn't have gay people. Why now there are many? Because the media, as soon as I heard gay people were arrested, and I heard the story, I knew, I didn't know who I am. That was like saying, you are not the only person who has gay feelings. So, although they kill them, but it helps other people to understand who they are, so to come out. And those who come out, like this gentleman said that now people are coming out. We come out because we have been through a lot. You want to talk about it so that you can help others who are still back in Uganda. But there are so many, even in this country, who are not yet out, who have not gone through a lot. They are still hiding because they don't know the next door person, what they will think about them.
The multi-questions, complex questions about why, why now and what's going on. Just one comment from me. I have no doubt, living in South Africa, that it is a useful political tool at a time when people are demanding houses and healthcare and education. To have a group in society that you target, as outsiders. In South Africa, it wasn't because the Constitution protects people. It wasn't gay people. It was Africans, immigrants. And there was this huge xenophobic wave in South Africa, which some politicians did not react to very, very vociferously, but sort of gave implicit support to. So for me, it seems as if that is what's happening with sexuality in Uganda, that it's a convenient group to consider to be outsiders, to build your political support base. I met with David Bahati and sat with him a few times as I was inviting him to be on this show. I don't get the impression, but that this is a religious crusade for him. I get the impression that he's somebody who has great notoriety now because of what he's been doing and has enjoyed that notoriety. Why is the West now focusing on this issue in particular? Is it? I mean,
I think it is. I mean, it's definitely gone up the agenda. I mean, you've now had UN Security Council resolutions, both for kind of certainly decriminalisation, but kind of recognition of kind of lesbian and gay humanity and lesbian and gay dignity. You've had Security Council resolutions in support of it, Security Council resolutions opposed to it, but you wouldn't have had that 5 years ago. I mean, so we are definitely in a world that is taking sexuality much more seriously, and it is. It's a big issue for donors in relation to aid. It's a big issue for the European Union. It's a big issue for the United States now, and so I think it definitely is a significant issue in the world kind of global politics. China, interestingly, decriminalised relatively recently. India has just gone through the process through litigation of decriminalising. There was a recent case in Nepal where they have decriminalised and recognised the rights of lesbian and gay people. So Hong Kong has done it. So I think that we're definitely living in a different world, and that's going to have ripples everywhere.
What's the UN's human rights body called?
Human Rights Council.
Human Rights Council. They recently had a discussion about non-judicial execution. Yeah. And there was a proposal, of course, to add sexuality.
And it was removed.
And it's removed. Yes. And South Africa was one of the countries that voted to have it removed. Right. So there was an effort to put in a policy against extrajudicial killing on many different grounds. There's a proposal to add sexuality to that. South Africa, notwithstanding its constitution, voted against adding sexuality to that. These things aren't.
But it's going to the latest question that these are issues now. They're not going to go away. I mean, that issue will come back to the Human Rights Council. You're increasingly seeing the bodies attached to the Human Rights Council making statements about lesbian and gay rights, particularly around criminalisation. I mean, it's interesting. Human rights law doesn't really have much to say about lesbian and gay rights, but it has one simple thing to say, which is you cannot criminalise. It doesn't say you have to have gay marriage, and it doesn't say you have to have gay housing rights or gay parenting rights. It just says you can't criminalise.
Flora, can we take one or two more comments there? Yeah, okay, great.
Christine Kahora from the Equality and Human Rights Commission. I just think that we need to be the context matters. The context here matters a lot, and the context is that this 38 countries are, as was mentioned before, emerging democracies. These are countries that are perhaps where Europe was 50 years ago. And what's happening is that things are probably changing, and perhaps there's an argument for allowing things to change a bit more organically. And it's good to have the West sort of intervening and helping things along. But I think what's going to bring about real fundamental change is that things are allowed to happen organically, just as they have in the Western world.
Things are happening very unorganically, of course, in North Africa at the moment. So there's a case for, organically but revolutionarily at the same time. Yep. It's just one or two other people who haven't spoken, then we'll come back to you.
Hello, my name's Thea. I just wanted to agree quite strongly with the last audience member, because throughout this discussion we've talked quite a lot about legislation and whether it be international pressure or whether a country is using it for political gain, the issue of gay rights. But there does seem to be a gap from John as well when he speaks about what it's like being a gay man in Uganda. You can't say that you're gay on the street, but I haven't heard a lot about what it's like as a member of the society, what people are really thinking and feeling. So the well-informed man in the purple shirt saying that there are, lots of now there are kind of more open gay rights activists all over Africa, but there's a difference between what's going on at a societal level and at a legislative level, and I wanted to agree with the organic expansion of this idea, because whether homosexuality is un-African is surely a question asked by Africans on the street rather than just Africans in Parliament.
Okay. Yep. There was somebody else over there? No? And then...
Sorry to talk so much.
Yep.
I just want to ask a question about, following on from the UN discussion, and about discussion in the film about children, and you can't be gay because you're not going to have children, so homosexuality is bad for population. We're this year we're going to hit 7 billion people on the planet, and I think, if I'm right, we're going to be about 1 billion. 1 billion in Africa, and then certainly in my adult lifetime that's nearly doubled what it was 30 years ago. I just wonder, in South Africa or Uganda, in other countries, is there an experience of people actually being to say, well, no, there are enough of us, so what we need is to improve quality, and that what we're seeing now is the fact that people, there's kind of population pressure that you express your homosexuality, or for some people it's by not having children. Is that part of the...
A genetic justification for homosexuality?
Well, maybe, I don't know, that is one strand.
Are you proposing that as a solution to population growth?
No, I'm just saying it's a function of... It's that part of the debate. It's a function of...
It's a function of the industrial societies. I would argue that's why it's come through. So when you've got societies where people don't need to have children, and where the value of children is different, and certainly African societies, I know your wealth is your children, and if that doesn't have to be the case anymore, and you're socially freer to have a life without children, and you can maybe express your and you're free to express homosexuality. It's just a thread. Has that been part of the discussion in South Africa? Because South Africa is the only industrialised country in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just on that, South Africa, of course, is simultaneously a highly industrialised country and a country with, rural, traditional populations in deep poverty, who at times hark back to, as Chief Levi did, what they consider to be their, age-old African traditions. So, personally, I think it's about what social movements or what becomes popular because it's made to be popular by people in the society. And I don't know how one gets at the answer to your question over there about, what ordinary people think when it's not about what politicians are doing, and it's not about whether you can come out or not come out as a political thing. How do you get at what people actually think away from all of that? It's been so politicized now that, being out or not being out in Uganda, at least, is a huge thing. I don't know whether you can sort of be away from that spotlight and just get a sense of what it's like to just be gay and not be worried about that, because you're always worried about that, aren't you?
I think the problem we have in Uganda, as long as you turn 18, they're expecting you to have a girlfriend. If you turn 20, they've never seen a girlfriend, they start questioning. If you go to 25, they've never seen you with a girlfriend, they start bringing women to your house. So things go on and on and on. It's not like in this country, you live in your house, nobody cares. But in Uganda, the whole village, about 500 people, they will know the son of so is not married. Why is he not married? Even before you tell them I'm gay, they want to question why a guy of 25 is not in a relationship with another woman. Why is it that man, wherever he walks with men? So those are the questions. You don't have to come out to be known that you are gay. But because of that pressure, And because of because they don't understand the situation, they think you are refusing just to get married. You can't explain to them, and you can't go to them and say, look, I'm gay, I don't want women, because you're protecting yourself. So in Uganda, you don't have to come out, but as long as you are not married to a woman, or if you're a woman, you don't have a husband, that's enough to explain who you are.
Okay, was there a question there we didn't answer? You made a point about things taking place organically in these emerging democracies. Did you want to say anything about that?
I think back to this lady, you said things were like that maybe 50 years ago in the UK than it is now in Uganda. Maybe that shows that Uganda, we are 50 years behind the UK. But there are some things in Uganda which happens in UK, 2 ministries in Uganda, why we don't now work fast when it comes to sexuality, but we can work with the other things. Africans, we didn't have presidents, we didn't have MPs, they had kingdoms where they had chiefs, king, and other people. But now they've changed because of the political issues, because they are just greedy to have money, to have powers to other people. That one, they changed it so fast. But when it comes to other things, because they are not interested, they just say, oh, England was like that 50 years ago, where they were killing the gay people, they were arresting them. We have to do that because we are 50. But other things, they cope up with the situation in the world.
I wasn't referring to that as a justification for. I wasn't referring to that as a justification for the persecution that gay people are suffering in Africa. All I was saying is that perhaps there needs to be a lot more thought put into taking more proactive measures as opposed to just reacting to a situation. Criminalizing, for example, is a reactive way of dealing with it. A proactive way of dealing with it is perhaps running campaigns, that, for example, address the question that the lady was asking. Just like you do with any of this type of things, the movement, around the sort of movement. So that's what I mean. I don't know if you.
But your difficulty is, whilst it's criminalised, so when John Bosco was in Uganda, he was criminalised. His identity was criminalised. He couldn't become active, and which is why that chap that we saw in Kampala was so brave to actually get out there and put his face on the television, because he was criminalised. Everything that he was kind of representing was a criminal offence, and it has a massively chilling effect to be criminalised in that way. So you're not going to get your organic movement whilst these issues are criminalised. I mean, nobody wants to be criminalised. Nobody wants to be dragged through that the indignity of prosecution and arrest and prosecution.
I mean, just having said that, as Feroz already said, there are gay rights movements in, I think, every African country. I mean, certainly all the ones I visited, in preparing for this programme, which was half a dozen, and then activists came to the show, and you saw some of them in the audience. In other countries where it's criminalised, there are gay rights organisations. In Uganda, there are gay rights organisations. There's an organisation called Sexual Minorities Uganda. That's one of the leading ones. So they do exist.
They do exist, but it's very, very difficult to kind of get the organic. I mean, I agree with you and your point as well about what you were saying about an organic movement. But whilst you have criminalisation on the statute book, it is very, very, very difficult. Virtually, to get a real movement, virtually impossible, I would have thought.
And I think also back to David Kato was the life example. He was really vocally. He was the person who has come out, he has aired the everything about gay people, gay rights. But what happened to him? No gay person will come on the street and say, oh look, I'm going to help you with this. But on the other hand, what you have to understand, Uganda, the Africans, they are so clever. They take advantage. Some of these gay activists in Uganda, they are not there to help gay people. They are also helping themselves, because they know if they get access to gay organizations in Western or developed countries, they will be in a picture of helping gay people, but they are not helping them. Because if you hear the way some of the gay people, the way they talk, they've never seen all these people. Some of the gay activities, they can come and say, oh, we are going to these seminars and everything, but you don't know them. Because when I put in my case in the Home Office, I asked, do you know this person as a gay activist in Uganda? Do you know this person? I didn't know them. By not knowing them, then I'm not gay. You know. So there are so many things you have already to understand within the gay thing. Some people, like as we say that, some people they take the platform as a political issue to talk about gay people to get what they want. It's the same thing with the other opportunity. So there's no way in Uganda you can come out and say, "Oh, I'm gay. This is the issue."
It's so sad, isn't it? I mean, that's David Bahati's accusation that you've, just in a small way affirmed there, very sadly, under present circumstances, that there are sort of incentives to attracting Ugandans to, being gay. I mean, the most cynical way to express it, of course, someone could say that, there would be Ugandans attracted by the idea of standing up and saying, I'm gay, because they might get asylum in Britain like you did. And obviously, it's hard to deny that incentive does exist under present circumstances, but the only way to remove it is for it to be legal to be who you are in Uganda, and then that won't need to be there. On that note, thank you for coming tonight. I was supposed to say, so I'll say now, the Open Society Initiative for Southern Africa, Soros Foundation, provided much of the funding to make the first world debate that we saw. And thanks very much for coming. Thank you to the Frontline Club. Thank you to Jonathan and John Bosco.